Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday morning, January the 16th. We have a lot to talk about this morning. Over the next several days, we will see the worst that winter can throw at us with widespread brutal cold, multiple snow and ice threats coming down the pike here. In fact, today there will be accumulating snow over the Great Lakes region and likely small accumulations into the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast U.S. later today into early tonight. Another snow threat exists for the eastern states on Sunday. That is as the leading edge of this widespread Arctic air mass reaches the eastern states. I think that incoming Arctic frontal boundary zone will produce a storm system on Sunday, and that could move to the north and east into the mid-Atlantic region, into the northeast U.S. with some accumulating snow. Then brutal cold air will follow for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Of course, Monday is Inauguration Day. There are currently planned outdoor activities at noontime and beyond. On Monday, January 21st, it will be bitterly cold. I would expect temperatures in D.C. around noontime on Monday, around 20 degrees or so. And that will be combining with a stiff north to northwest wind to make it feel much, much colder. Wind chill values way down there during the day on Monday in the Washington, D.C. area and throughout the eastern part of the nation. Single-digit overnight lows Monday night, Tuesday night, even in the I-95 corridor region. By the time we get to Tuesday morning, much of the northern U.S. will be below normal. This is a forecast map of 2-meter temperature anomalies I wanted to show here at the forefront of this video discussion because it's pretty amazing indeed for Tuesday morning. This is early Tuesday, January the 21st, 2-meter temperature anomalies. This is near the surface level, and it's from the Canadian model run of last night at 0Z. And this is pretty incredible when you see coast-to-coast cold like this. That is about as widespread as it can get. And it is not only below normal, but it is way below normal. Many parts of the nation here will be some 20, 25 degrees below normal. And I mentioned this before, the third week of January, from a statistical point of view, a climatological point of view, is actually the coldest time of the year. So when you're 20 or 25 degrees below normal, those normal temperatures are at their lowest level on this particular week here, the third week of January. So this is some incredible cold that we're looking at. And again, very widespread and dangerous cold indeed. By that I mean you do not want to spend a lot of time outdoors in this kind of cold. This is some serious cold. I saw yesterday a report that still some people in makeshift tents out there in the western part of North Carolina because of the hurricane damage 3-4 months ago. Got to get them to some permanent shelter for this upcoming cold wave. This is some serious cold on the way. And I've also mentioned before that there's a Siberian connection to this cold wave that's coming, this Arctic invasion that's coming to the U.S. Why is that important? Well, you can get some extremely cold air that builds up over Siberia. There's a deep snowpack there this time of the year, and whenever you get air that crosses over the North Pole from the Asian side of the pole into Canada, ultimately into the U.S., that can contain some extremely cold air. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit more using the next couple of charts here. But again, a Siberian connection to this Arctic invasion, and it will be incredibly cold over a widespread area by the time we get to Tuesday morning. Statistically, the coldest time of the year. Well, let me show this plot here that comes from NOAA. NOAA runs a model they call the high split model that can trace air parcels back to their origin. Basically, they call this a backward trajectory model. What we're looking at here is for Tuesday morning, that same time period that we just showed, that 2-meter temperature anomaly forecast map for the early morning hours on Tuesday, January 21st. The air parcels over in this particular model run over the DC metro region had their origin all the way back to here in some cases. And this is the North Pole right here, Greenland right here. And in this particular cold wave outbreak, you're having some air parcels originate over Siberia. Again, this whole area has just a tremendous snowpack this time of the year. Some deeply, extremely cold air masses build up there. In this particular case, some of that air is making its way across the North Pole into Canada and ultimately into the U.S. And really, that's where you can trace it back to from the D.C. metro region, the Middle Atlantic region, by the time you get to Tuesday morning. So indeed, there is what I call this cross-polar flow or Siberian connection associated with this incoming Arctic invasion that will envelop much of the nation by the early part of next week. Well, I want to now focus in on the Canadian model run for the next several weather parameters here that we'll take a look at. But first I wanted to start it off here with the GFS model run from last night. And this is just this one time frame I want to show here. This is the GFS model run for midday Sunday. And here is a kind of a picture of what the GFS is showing in terms of that Arctic wave that I do believe will form along that incoming frontal system on Sunday. Again, I think the GFS is underplaying this system. I do believe there's enough energy in the atmosphere to produce a stronger storm. So just wanted to show why I'm not using the GFS. I don't believe it's solution right now. I think it'll catch on. It's maybe this morning's model run for the GFS will have a more significant system. But this is the GFS model run for midday on Sunday. And here is the Canadian for that same time. I favor the Canadian. I mean, it may be overplaying it a little bit, but still, I think this is just vastly underplaying what I believe will be the case on Sunday. I'm certainly looking at the possibility of accumulating snow, but even places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. It could be rain changing to snow, but ultimately it'll be all snow in much of the Mid-Atlantic, Northeast U.S. Again, the GFS just seems to me to be underplaying this. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. But we'll see with the subsequent model runs here from the GFS. So I'm going to stick with the GFS. Again, we'll take a look at this more closely in a couple of minutes here. But this is its forecast map for midday on Sunday. Now, let's take a look here at the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast maps from that 0Z run of the Canadian model here. And this is as we begin the day here on Thursday morning, January the 16th. And areas of blue represent lower heights than normal, lower pressures than normal. Areas in orange or red, higher heights, higher pressures than normal. And generally, on these kind of maps, the wind kind of flows parallel to these black lines here. And again, this is the North Pole right here. It's hard to see on this particular North America viewpoint, but this is the North Pole. And when you see the isotachs here, the tight lines in this kind of orientation, that's telling us air is flowing from Siberia onto the North America side of the North Pole, and ultimately that gets wrapped up into what's incoming across the southern part of Canada and then throughout the northern U.S. And in this particular case, that cold air is going to really spread all the way from coast to coast by the time we get to Tuesday morning. So let's kind of walk through, and again, we're looking at the 500 millibar height anomalies. So the first thing I wanted to point out was that Siberian connection to this incoming Arctic blast here, this Arctic invasion. Another main factor I want to show here is we have this intensifying upper level trough by the time we get to the early part of the weekend. It's a very impressive upper level trough here. It's kind of surrounded by high latitude blocking off to its north and east and off to its north and west. This is obviously a very cold pattern here setting up for much of the nation. This is by Sunday morning. And notice the flow of air perhaps in this area by the time we get to Sunday morning. If I go parallel to these lines, that is kind of why I expect this Arctic front that will be sliding slowly to the south and east. It tends to, whenever it goes parallel to the upper level winds, it tends to slow down. And basically that frontal system will slow down into the southeastern part of the nation, that incoming Arctic front. And that's why that will allow for low pressure to form along that frontal boundary zone. By frontal boundary zone, I mean temperature gradient, a sharp temperature gradient that tends to lead to convergence, can lead to the development of a surface low pressure area. So I think the upper level winds will allow for this frontal system to stall out for a while in the southeastern states. And on a Sunday, that could allow for that formation of an Arctic wave of low pressure right along that incoming Arctic frontal system here. Then we move forward into the early part of next week, and here we go on Monday, and then on Tuesday, we can see kind of a rotation around of another wave of energy in the upper part of the atmosphere. We'll have to see how this ultimately sets things up for the possible development of a storm system over the Gulf region by the middle part of next week. Indeed, if this comes to fruition, there will be some very cold air penetrated all the way down to the Gulf Coast. So any kind of a system that forms here in the middle of next week, or again another threat, maybe the end of next week, could produce snow and ice way down in the deep south. Places like Texas all the way to Georgia could potentially see some snow and or ice in the middle of next week, even the latter part of next week, as this cold wave again will penetrate all the way down to the Gulf Coast, similar to the last cold wave that resulted in some snow and ice way down into the southern states. Now let's take a look at the vorticity field, and these are areas of spin in the upper part of the atmosphere, usually associated with jet streaks. The jet streaks are the fastest blowing winds in the middle of an overall jet stream, and rotation in the upper part of the atmosphere where these vorticity centers are can produce upward motion that down at the surface level produces clouds and precipitation in low pressure areas. Here is a system right now we're dealing with over the Great Lakes, and it slides to the south and east. It can be called a clipper system. Those systems that are fast movers from the northwest to the southeast crossing the Great Lakes. You can call this a clipper system. It's producing a few inches of snow today over the Great Lakes, and soon there will be snow breaking out even in the Appalachian, to the east of the Appalachian Mountains in the I-95 corridor region. Expect some occasional snow, let's say from midday on in D.C. and Philadelphia, maybe mid-afternoon on in New York City. And the roads are so cold, it's been so cold that even a coating to an inch or so, which I think is the case here for later today and tonight in the I-95 corridor region, even with that small amount of snow, there could be some quick slick spots because the roads are so cold, and temperatures will remain below freezing all day long across the entire I-95 corridor region. So that's today's system. Then we go towards the weekend, and this is when an Arctic front arrives in the eastern part of the nation. The real Arctic blast begins early in the weekend up across the northern plains, much of the central states. First of all, there will be a wave of energy here that can cause some rain, maybe a mix of rain, sleet, and snow in the eastern states on Saturday. That's when temperatures are still rather moderate in the eastern states. Not a big precipitation event. And then we get into the day on Sunday. And that is when that Arctic frontal system slows down, maybe stalls out for a while over the Tennessee Valley, over the southeastern states. And here is that wave of energy as of Sunday morning right here that I do believe will cause a development of what can be called an Arctic wave right along that frontal boundary zone, ultimately able to produce some accumulating snow, even in the I-95 corridor region. That is a threat on Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. Could be quite an entertaining Eagles game. They play the Rams at 3 o'clock in Philly on Sunday afternoon. Very well could be snowing at that particular time. Again, I favor the Canadian model in this case compared to the GFS, which is really underplaying the system, I believe. Well, so we'll obviously focus in on this threat over the next couple of days, but I think there will be a wave of low pressure that forms right along that temperature gradient zone with the Arctic front. That moves to the north and east, and then, as I mentioned in the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast maps, there's another wave of energy we'll have to watch later in next week, by the time we get to the middle part of next week, that could help to generate a storm system over the Gulf states by the middle part of next week, and it's something important to watch because cold air will be firmly entrenched all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Well, let's take a look at the 850 millibar. This is about 5,000 feet off the surface, and I tend to show this instead of the 2-meter temperature anomaly maps because it tends to be smoother. It doesn't have to deal with mountains like the surface maps have to, but and generally when you're below normal at 850, you're below normal at the surface. So this is beginning the day here on Thursday. Very cold over Greenland. By the way, I checked the surface temperatures there yesterday. One place I saw was 61 degrees below zero, right about in this area right here. So there's some very, very cold air to the north here of the U.S. here, and some of that will feed into this Arctic invasion as well. 61 below right there, where this well below normal temperature is showing up here, and this is for this evening. What I looked at was last evening over Greenland. But here we go into the early part of the upcoming weekend. And here is that Arctic air mass here starting to show up by early part of the weekend. This is late Friday night into early Saturday morning. It dives from the central and western part of Canada into the central part of the U.S. Let's clear that map here and move forward here. First of all, it kind of plunges all the way down south into the state of Texas by the time we get to the latter part of Saturday. And here's when that Arctic front on the eastern flank will tend to start to slow down by the time we get into Sunday morning. It'll be that Arctic frontal boundary zone right in this area right here. That's where low pressure will form with increasingly colder air moving into its north and west. And here we go. By the time we get to Sunday morning, brutal cold all the way down to Texas, all the way out to the interior western part of the nation, and gradually making its way into the east. And here we go. By the time we get to Monday morning, Inauguration Day in D.C., we have this widespread brutal cold, really the coldest air in the whole northern hemisphere, situated right here early part of next week. We'll go all the way out into Tuesday morning, and this is right here. This is correlated to the map I showed at the start of this video discussion. Widespread, bitter cold temperatures from the west coast all the way to the east coast, and even beyond that into the Hudson Bay region of Canada, southeastern Canada. Just very, very impressive, and in some cases dangerous cold. Do not spend a lot of time outdoors in this kind of a cold wave. Well, let's wrap up with a continental U.S. viewpoint here rather than that North America viewpoint. The surface maps from the 0Z run of the Canadian model. Here is that Clipper system causing snow already over the Great Lakes. It slides to the south and east, and some of that snow will make its way across the Appalachian Mountains into the I-95 corridor region, I do believe, on the order of maybe a coating to an inch or so. The D.C., especially the northern suburbs of D.C., up across southeastern PA and the Philly metro region, New York City. Watch for slick spots, even though small accumulations. The roads are very, very cold. Temperatures this morning throughout the suburban areas to the north and west of the big cities in the teens, in the upper teens. Very, very cold road conditions, so watch for slick spots. That moves off to the east. Then we get a little bit of moderation in temperatures in the eastern states on Friday, even into the day on Saturday. There's a relatively weak system. We saw some of that energy in the upper part of the atmosphere that can produce some rain, snow, sleet on Saturday. Do not expect a heavy rain, a heavy precipitation event on Saturday. And then we start to get involved with that incoming Arctic frontal system into the eastern states. The Arctic air, by the time we get to Sunday morning, has already penetrated way down into the central states, all the way into Texas. Look at this 540 line here, all the way down into central Texas. And here is that Arctic wave right here, forming right along that Arctic boundary zone that will be stretched in this area right here, a sharp temperature gradient over a short period of a landmass here. There could be rain at the onset in some places like D.C., for example, maybe Philly, but ultimately that will be a rain change from snow situation on Sunday. And again, accumulations are most definitely on the table, even for the big cities on Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. This system rides up to the North Andes. And again, it could be an entertaining Eagles game, 3 o'clock on Sunday, with potential of snow falling at that time. This is the midday Sunday forecast map. And again, it could start at rain. Let's say I-95 points to the east of there to the coast, and then change to snow as that Arctic air oozes in from the north and west. Once that passes on by, the brutal cold really floods the mid-Atlantic region. Again, noontime temperatures on Monday could be around 20 degrees in D.C., and all the big cities could drop way down in the single digits, not only Monday night, but Tuesday night as well. A large part of the nation will be below zero on those nights, going into early Tuesday, going into early Wednesday. Certainly in this part of the nation here, much of the northern U.S. And then by the time we get to the middle part of next week, we'll have to watch this system right here. There's another wave of energy rotating around the southern portion of that large-scale upper-level trough. Could set off the development of a big storm system down in the Gulf Coast region by the early part of next week, and the air will be so cold so far to the south, you can get ice and snow way down in the southern states by the middle of next week. This is going all the way out to Wednesday morning, and it's too early to say if this ends up riding up along the East Coast or tends to get a little bit suppressed off to the south and east of the Mid-Atlantic region in this fashion here. We'll focus on that over the next few days here, but first we have the system today and then a potential accumulating snow event on Sunday, and then brutal cold air envelops the nation by the time we get to Monday and Tuesday of next week. Again, Tuesday could end up being one of the coldest days in history, as we will see this Arctic invasion from coast to coast by the time we get to Tuesday morning. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.